Welcome to GeoHistory Files. Here, history isn't just remembered, it's investigated. Every empire, every war, and every political decision leaves a legacy that still shapes our world today. If you're new here, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Now, let's uncover the story they never wanted you to know. In 480 BC, a single empire ruled 44% of every human being alive on Earth. That empire was Persian. 25 centuries later, the land it was born from still exists. It still speaks a version of its ancient language. It still remembers its kings, its poets, its fires. The borders have shifted, the religion has changed. The dynasties have risen and fallen so many times that the soil itself seems layered with thrones. And yet the thing beneath all of it, the idea, the identity, the memory, has never been extinguished. Not by Alexander, not by the Arabs, not by the Mongols, not by the superpowers of the modern age. This is the story of Iran, not a country, but a civilization. One that has been conquered, burned, occupied, dismembered, and reshaped more times than almost any other place on Earth. And one that, every single time, refused to disappear. The Plateau. Long before it had a name, the land was already old. The Iranian Plateau, a vast, elevated stretch of territory between Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, was home to scattered settlements as early as the 5th millennium BC. Susa, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in history, was already a functioning urban center by 4000 BC. The Elamite civilization, rooted in the lowlands of what is now Khuzestan, rose alongside Sumer and Babylon as one of the earliest complex societies on Earth. It developed its own writing, its own legal codes, its own gods. But Elam was not Iran. It was something before Iran. A foundation buried beneath what would come. For thousands of years, the peoples of the plateau existed without a unifying state, without a shared identity. They were Elamites, Medes, Persians, Scythians, Manians. Dozens of groups separated by mountains, language, and loyalty. The plateau waited. It needed a catalyst. 2. The Medes in the first unification. Around 700 BC, the Medes, an Iranian people concentrated in the northwest, began to consolidate. Under a ruler named Deioces, they built a capital at Ecbatana, modern-day Hamadan, and for the first time organized the scattered Iranian tribes into something resembling a kingdom. By 612 BC, the Medes had done something extraordinary. In alliance with the Babylonians, they destroyed Nineveh and brought down the Assyrian Empire, one of the most feared military powers in the ancient world. For a brief moment, the Medes dominated the Near East. Their kingdom stretched from eastern Anatolia to the edges of Central Asia. But the Medes were not destined to hold what they had built. Their kingdom was loose, decentralized, and vulnerable, and from within it, from the southern region of Persis, a vassal prince was watching. His name was Cyrus. 3. Cyrus and the birth of empire. In 550 BC, Cyrus II of the Achaemenid house rose against his Median overlord, Astyages, and defeated him. It was not merely a rebellion, it was a transfer of civilizational power. Within 11 years, Cyrus would conquer Lydia, absorb the Greek cities of Anatolia, sweep across Central Asia, and take Babylon, the greatest city in the ancient world. Without a major battle, Babylon's gates were opened from within. The priests, disaffected by their own king, welcomed the Persian. Cyrus did something no conqueror before him had done on such a scale. He did not destroy what he conquered. He absorbed it. He freed the Jews from their Babylonian captivity. He allowed subject peoples to keep their gods, their customs, their languages. A cylinder inscribed in Babylonian cuneiform, now housed in the British Museum, declared these principles in terms that some scholars have called the first charter of human rights. The empire he left behind was inherited by his son Cambyses, who added Egypt, and then after a period of upheaval by Darius I, who built the administrative machinery that would define Persia for 2 centuries. Darius divided the empire into satrapies, provinces governed by appointed officials, connected by a royal road stretching from Susa to Sardis over 2,500 kilometers. A messenger could cross it in 7 days. He standardized weights, coins, and laws. He built Persepolis, a ceremonial capital of such scale that its ruins still stagger those who walk through them. By 480 BC, the Achaemenid Empire governed roughly 49 million people, 44% of the world's population, from Libya to the Indus, from the Aral Sea to the Persian Gulf. It was the largest empire the world had ever seen, yet something had already begun to change. 4. The fall that was not a death. The Greco-Persian Wars, beginning with Darius's failed expedition to punish Athens and culminating in Xerxes' massive invasion of Greece, ended in strategic humiliation. The defeats at Marathon, Salamis, and Plataea did not destroy the empire. Persia remained vast and wealthy for another 150 years, but the wars revealed a fissure. The western frontier was contested, the dynasty grew decadent, court intrigue thickened. In 334 BC, Alexander of Macedon crossed the Hellespont with roughly 40,000 men. Within 3 years, the Achaemenid Empire, the largest political structure the ancient world had ever known, ceased to exist. Darius III fled the battlefield at Gaugamela and was murdered by his own satraps. Persepolis was burned. The royal treasury was emptied. Alexander believed he had conquered Persia. He had not. He had conquered a dynasty. The land, the people, the culture, these did not burn with Persepolis. Alexander himself seemed to understand this. He adopted Persian customs. He married a Bactrian princess. He wore Persian robes. And when he died in Babylon in 323 BC at the age of 32, his empire fractured immediately into warring fragments. The Greeks, who inherited the eastern portion, the Seleucids, tried to impose Hellenistic culture across Iran. They built Greek-style cities. They installed Greek administrators. For a time, it seemed as though the Iranian identity might dissolve into the wider Mediterranean world. It did not dissolve. It waited. Furim, the Parthian resurrection. Around 247 BC, in the northeastern corner of Iran, a semi-nomadic Iranian people called the Parni, later known as the Parthians, seized the province of Parthia from its Seleucid governor. Their leader was Arsaces I, and his dynasty would endure for nearly 5 centuries. The Parthians did not rise all at once. Their expansion was slow, methodical, opportunistic. As the Seleucids weakened, battered by Rome in the west and internal rebellion in the east, the Arsacid dynasty spread southward and westward. By 141 BC, under Mithridates I, the Parthians controlled Mesopotamia, Media, and Persis. They had reassembled much of the old Achaemenid territory. The Greeks had failed to erase Iran. Iran had simply grown back around them. The Parthian Empire became the primary rival of Rome, and in 53 BC, at the Battle of Carrhae, the Parthians delivered one of the most devastating defeats in Roman military history. Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, member of the first triumvirate alongside Caesar and Pompey, led 7 legions into the desert east of the Euphrates. The Parthian general Surena, commanding a smaller force of mounted archers and armored cavalry, annihilated them. Crassus was killed. His head was sent to the Parthian king. According to one account, it was used as a prop in a performance of Euripides' The Bacchae at the Arsacid court. Rome would try again, and again, and again. For nearly 3 centuries, the Euphrates River remained the border between the 2 great powers. Rome never conquered Parthia. Parthia never conquered Rome. The stalemate held. But internal decay, feuding noble houses, decentralized authority, a weakened monarchy, slowly hollowed the Arsacid state from within. 6. The Sassanid Revival. In 224 AD, a Persian nobleman named Ardashir from the province of Persis, the very same homeland of Cyrus, rose against the last Arsacid king and defeated him at the Battle of Hormozgan. The Parthian Empire ended. The Sassanid Empire began. Ardashir and his successors did something the Parthians had never fully done. They explicitly revived the memory of the Achaemenids. They called their realm Aranshar, the empire of the Iranians. They restored Zoroastrianism as the state religion. They centralized power. They built one of the most sophisticated bureaucracies the ancient world had ever seen. Under Shapur I, the second Sassanid king, Persia achieved something Rome had never experienced. In 260 AD, at the Battle of Edessa, Shapur defeated the Roman Emperor Valerian and captured him alive. A Roman emperor, taken prisoner. It was the first and only time this ever happened in the history of Rome. Shapur commemorated his victory in a massive rock relief at Nakshi Rostam, where the image endures to this day. The Persian king on horseback, the Roman emperor kneeling before him. For 4 centuries, the Sassanid Empire stood as the great Eastern counterweight to Rome and then Byzantium. Persian art, science, philosophy, and medicine flourished. The Academy of Gondishapur became one of the most important centers of learning in the world, drawing scholars from Greece, India, and Syria. Sassanid Persia was not merely a military power. It was a civilization at its zenith. However, the stability was fragile. By the early 7th century, the Sassanids had been locked in a catastrophic war with Byzantium. The two empires bled each other white. Between 602 and 628 AD, the fighting surged back and forth across the Near East. The Sassanids briefly captured Jerusalem, Egypt, and much of Anatolia, then lost it all. The treasury was depleted, the nobility fractured. In the 12 years between 628 and 640, more than a dozen claimants fought for the Sassanid throne. And from the south, from the Arabian desert, something was coming that neither empire expected. 7. The Arab Storm. In 636, at the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah, an Arab Muslim army, fighting under the banner of the new faith of Islam, shattered the Sassanid forces on the plains of Iraq. Within a decade, the entire empire had fallen. The last Sassanid king, Yazdegerd III, fled eastward across his own realm, seeking allies who never came. He was murdered in 651 AD, reportedly by a miller in Merv, at the far edge of his former domain. It was the most complete collapse in Iranian history. The state was gone. The religion, Zoroastrianism, was gradually displaced. The ruling class was dismantled. Arabic became the language of administration, law, and scripture. On the surface, this should have been the end. Every other civilization that the Arab conquest swept through, Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Levant, North Africa, eventually lost its native language. Coptic gave way to Arabic. Aramaic gave way to Arabic. Berber was marginalized. These were ancient cultures, older in some cases than Persia itself. They were absorbed. Iran was not. The Persian language did not die. It retreated into the countryside, into the oral traditions of the people, into poetry. And within 2 centuries, something remarkable happened. Under the Samanid dynasty, an Iranian Muslim dynasty that ruled in the East from 819 to 999 AD, Persian was revived as a literary and administrative language. It came back, not as it was before. It had absorbed thousands of Arabic words, but its grammar, its syntax, its soul remained Iranian. And then came the poet. 8. The poet who saved a civilization. Around 977 AD, a man named Ferdowsi from the city of Tus in northeastern Iran began writing an epic poem. It would take him over 30 years to complete. He called it the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. It was an act of cultural defiance disguised as literature. The Shahnameh told the mythological and historical story of Iran from the creation of the world to the Arab conquest in Persian. Not in Arabic, Ferdowsi deliberately avoided Arabic loanwords wherever he could. He wove together pre-Islamic legends, Zoroastrian mythology, and the stories of real Persian kings into a single, monumental work of more than 50,000 couplets. It was, and remains, one of the longest epic poems ever written by a single author. The effect was immeasurable. The Shahnameh became the foundational text of Persian identity. It reminded Iranians who they had been before Islam without rejecting Islam itself. It gave them continuity, it gave them a past, and it gave them something no conqueror could take, a story about themselves told in their own language. Other peoples lost this. Iranians did not, and the reason, more than any other, was a poet working in solitude for 3 decades. 9. the Mongol annihilation. In 1219, Genghis Khan turned his attention westward, the Khwarezmian Empire, an Iranian Muslim state that controlled much of Central Asia and eastern Iran, had made a fatal miscalculation. Its governor had executed a Mongol trade envoy. Genghis Khan sent a diplomatic mission to demand justice. The Khwarezmian Shah killed the ambassadors. What followed was among the most devastating military campaigns in human history. The Mongols swept across Iran with a ferocity that had no precedent. Entire cities were razed to the ground. At Nishapur, medieval sources record that the Mongols killed every living thing. Men, women, children, dogs, cats. Modern scholars dispute the chronicler's claim of 1.7 million dead, but even conservative estimates place the toll in the hundreds of thousands for that city alone. At Merv, contemporaries recorded 700,000 killed. At Herat, similar numbers. Modern historians estimate that the Mongol invasion killed between 10 and 15 million people on the Iranian plateau, perhaps 3/4 of the population. Irrigation systems that had sustained agriculture for centuries were destroyed and never rebuilt. Cities that had been among the largest in the world became ruins. Some regions did not recover their pre-Mongol population levels for 600 years. This was not conquest, this was erasure. But Iran did not disappear. Exile, the conquerors who became Persian. Within 2 generations of the initial invasion, the Mongol rulers of Iran began to change. The Ilkhanate, the Mongol successor state that governed Persia, adopted Islam. They began patronizing Persian art, Persian architecture, Persian literature. Ghazan Khan, who came to power in 1295, converted to Islam and rebuilt much of what his predecessors had destroyed. This pattern would repeat itself with eerie consistency throughout Iranian history. Conquerors arrived, they destroyed, and then slowly, almost imperceptibly, Iran absorbed them. The Mongols became Persian, just as the Seleucids had been Persianized before them, just as the Turkic invaders who followed would be Persianized after them. Tamerlane came in the late 14th century. Another wave of destruction from the steppe, another trail of skull towers and burning cities. Baghdad, which had already been obliterated by the Mongols in 1258, was sacked again. Isfahan, one of Persia's greatest cities, suffered a massacre so severe that Tamerlane's own chroniclers recorded it with apparent discomfort. And yet, the Timurid dynasty that Tamerlane left behind became one of the great patrons of Persian civilization. His descendants built mosques, madrasas, and gardens of extraordinary beauty. They wrote in Persian. They painted miniatures in the Persian style. They memorized the Shahnameh. Iran kept doing this. It kept converting its destroyers into its inheritors. 11. The Safavid transformation. By the early 16th century, Iran had been fractured for decades under competing Turkmen tribal confederations. There was no central state, no unified identity beyond the cultural. In 1501, a 14-year-old named Ismail, the leader of a militant Sufi order called the Safaviya, captured Tabriz and declared himself Shah. He proclaimed Twelver Shia Islam as the state religion. It was a radical act. Iran had been majority Sunni. Ismail's conversion was enforced, sometimes violently, over the following decades. Sunni scholars were exiled or killed. Shia clerics were imported from Lebanon and Bahrain. The consequences were permanent. Iran became Shia, and in doing so, it carved out a distinct identity within the Islamic world. Separate from the Ottoman Sunni Empire to the west, separate from the Mughal Sunni Empire to the east. The Safavid decision created a religious boundary that aligned for the first time in a millennium with a political and cultural one. Under Shah Abbas I, who reigned from 1588 to 1629, the Safavid Empire reached its peak. Abbas rebuilt Isfahan into one of the most magnificent cities on earth. The Naqshi Jahan Square, the mosques, the bridges, the bazaars, they drew travelers from across the world. The phrase Isfahan is half the world entered common speech. The Safavid military, reorganized with the help of English advisors, recaptured territory from the Ottomans and the Uzbeks. Trade flourished. Silk exports filled European markets. But the dynasty decayed from within. Weak successors, court isolation, and an over-reliance on slave soldiers eroded the state. In 1722, an Afghan tribal army besieged Isfahan and starved it into submission. The Safavid Empire collapsed in a matter of months. 12. The Long Erosion. What followed was a century of chaos. Nader Shah, a military genius of Turkmen origin, briefly reunited Iran and even invaded India in 1739, sacking Delhi and carrying off the Peacock throne and the Koh-i-Noor diamond. His empire did not survive his assassination in 1747. The Zand dynasty ruled parts of Iran for a few decades. Then the Qajars, another Turkic tribal dynasty, took power in 1789 and held it loosely for over a century. The Qajar era was defined not by strength but by loss. Iran, weakened and underdeveloped compared to the industrializing powers of Europe, became a playing field for the British Empire and the Russian Empire. The so-called Great Game, the strategic rivalry between London and St. Petersburg, treated Iran as a buffer, a chessboard, a thing to be divided rather than dealt with as an equal. In 1813 and again in 1828, Iran lost wars to Russia and was forced to cede vast territories in the Caucasus. Present-day Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan. The Treaty of Turkmenistan in 1828 stripped Iran of nearly all its northern holdings and imposed humiliating capitulatory rights on Russian subjects within Iran. The British, meanwhile, secured dominance over Iran's south and its access to the Persian Gulf. Iran was not colonized in the formal sense. It was not occupied like India or carved up like Africa, but it was hollowed out. Its sovereignty was real in name and hollow in practice. Foreign powers decided its trade policies, its military capabilities, its borders. Yet Iran did not fracture. It did not become a colony. It remained diminished but intact, the same civilization it had been for thousands of years. 13. Oil and the modern trap. In 1901, a British entrepreneur named William Knox D'Arcy obtained a concession to explore for oil across most of Iran. In 1908, oil was struck at Masjid Soliman. It was the first major oil discovery in the Middle East. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company, later renamed British Petroleum, was formed to extract it. The profits flowed overwhelmingly to Britain. Iran received a fraction. This arrangement persisted for decades. During both world wars, Iran was occupied by foreign troops despite its declared neutrality. In 1941, Britain and the Soviet Union jointly invaded Iran to secure supply lines and oil access, forcing the reigning Shah to abdicate in favor of his young son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. In 1951, the Iranian parliament, led by Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, voted to nationalize the oil industry. It was a legal, democratic act. Mossadegh argued simply that Iran's oil belonged to Iran. The British disagreed, and when diplomacy failed, they turned to the Americans. In August 1953, a joint CIA MI6 operation, codenamed Ajax by the Americans, Boot by the British, orchestrated a coup that removed Mossadegh from power and restored full authority to the Shah. A democratically elected government was toppled to protect foreign oil interests. The Shah, now fully dependent on Western backing, ruled for another 26 years with increasing authoritarianism, backed by a feared secret police, the Savak. The coup of 1953 did not merely remove a prime minister. It embedded a grievance into the Iranian national consciousness that has never fully healed. 14. Revolution and war. In 1979, that grievance, compounded by decades of political repression, rapid westernization, and economic inequality, erupted. The Iranian Revolution overthrew the Pahlavi dynasty and replaced it with an Islamic republic under Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. The Shah fled. He would die in exile the following year. The revolution stunned the world. It did not follow the expected Cold War script. It was not communist. It was not liberal. It was something the West had no framework for. A modern revolution driven by religious ideology, popular mobilization, and a deep accumulated anger at foreign interference. Before the new state could consolidate, it was tested. In September 1980, Saddam Hussein's Iraq, armed and encouraged by both Western and Arab governments, who feared the spread of Iran's revolution, invaded. The Iran-Iraq War lasted 8 years. It killed an estimated 500,000 to 1 million people. Iraq used chemical weapons, including nerve agents and mustard gas, against Iranian soldiers and civilians. The international community largely looked away. Iran fought the war with revolutionary fervor and enormous sacrifice. Teenage volunteers walked into minefields. Cities were bombarded. The economy was shattered. When the war ended in 1988 with no territorial changes, Khomeini described accepting the ceasefire as drinking poison. The world had tried, once again, to destroy Iran, through invasion, through chemical weapons, through international isolation. Iran endured. 14. The weight of continuity. There is a pattern in this story, and it is not one of triumph. It is something more complex and more difficult to name. Iran has been conquered by the Greeks, the Arabs, the Mongols, the Turks. It has been manipulated by the British, the Russians, the Americans. It has been invaded, sanctioned, isolated, and destabilized. Its cities have been burned more than once. Its population has been decimated, literally reduced to a fraction, more than once. And every time the civilization reassembled itself. Not always in the same form, not always under the same name, not always with the same religion or the same rulers, but with the same language, the same memory, the same stubborn insistence on existing. The Persians did not survive because they were stronger than their enemies. They often were not. The Mongols were stronger. Alexander was stronger. The Arab armies were stronger. The Western powers of the 20th century were immeasurably stronger. Iran survived because its identity was never located in a single dynasty, a single religion, or a single political structure. It was located in something deeper, in the language, in the poetry, in the stories told by one generation to the next. It was located in the Shahnameh, in the memory of Cyrus, in the Nowruz celebrations that predated Islam and continued after it, in the Persian gardens and the calligraphy and the carpets and the philosophy that every conqueror, sooner or later, found themselves unable to resist. Empires are fragile. They depend on armies, on treasuries, on the loyalty of generals, and the obedience of provinces. When these fail, the empire falls. But a civilization is not an empire. A civilization is what remains when the empire is gone. 5,000 years, dozens of invasions, a dozen dynasties, and still, the same plateau, the same language, the same unbroken thread of memory stretching from Susa to the present day. Every empire that tried to destroy Iran is now gone. Iran remains.